And here we are, the wide, wide world. Sorry. Came Howard Cosell for a moment there. Hey, kids. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Dee 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 dee. Hello, you've joined me just in time for Picks of the Week. Ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. Why does it have to be backwards? When I'm looking at it, and then when I upload it, then it's a whole thing. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, this actually came out a couple weeks ago. This is Human Target #1. I'm very, very excited. I've been trying to get my stack down, but I've been kind of going in order. But I was like, I can't not get this book. So, The Human Target is one of my favorite funny books of all time. Originally created by Mr. Len Wein for the back pages of Action Comics in the 1970s. Christopher Chance is I don't know what, I guess he's technically a private investigator, but his whole hook is that he's a master of disguise. So somebody comes to him and says, hey, somebody's trying to kill me. And Christopher Chance says, well, don't call the police, whatever you do. Why don't instead you go into hiding? I will disguise myself as you, a disguise so infallible that the bad guys won't know. They're trying to kill you, but they're shooting at me. Those are the lyrics from the 2004 song Human Target by San Diego's own The Dissimilars. Yes, that was my old band. I love this comic book so much I wrote a song about it. And frankly, it's always been one of our better ones. So that was the basic premise back in the 70s, and then the character would pop back up every now and again. In the early 90s, they made a movie. They made a TV show. It might have been a TV movie, like a pilot that didn't go anywhere. Starring Richard Dean Anderson, TV's MacGyver as Christopher Chance, and I've never seen it. And they put out one shot, a Human Target special that was, more or less based on the TV show. And then in the early aughts, Peter Milligan, the great Peter Milligan, revamped the character for DC's Vertigo imprint, so it was a mature reader's book, which means they could have swear words and stuff. And it was so good. That was my introduction to the character. I was very unfamiliar with the character before that point. Drawn by Javier Pulido and or Cliff Chang, both of whom I've saw, and Peter Milligan too. And then in 2009, I want to say it was, maybe 2010, they made another attempt at a television program, which I think lasted at least one season, so longer than the first one, but I never watched that one either. I got into this with my boss at the comic shop today, in fact. He was like, you've not seen it? Like, I haven't watched any of the Netflix Marvel shows like Daredevil or Punisher. He's like, what are you not? And I go, I got comics to read, man. No time to sit around and watch TV all day. So now that brings us to this Human Target series with a black label, but it's not an oversized magazine. Written by fan favorite Tom King, who, excuse me, I am always getting him and Tom Taylor mixed up. Tom Taylor wrote Superior Iron Man. So Tom King wrote the Vision for Marvel back a few years ago. Unbelievable. With art by Gabriel Walta. And he also, around that same time, I want to say, or maybe shortly thereafter, brought back Mr. Miracle, Jack Kirby creation. Again, an incredible series. Critically acclaimed. Very popular series. Excuse me for a second. I need to get a drink. Oh, when we're on, why don't you tell me? And this is drawn by Greg Smallwood, who's one of my favorite artists working today. Smallwood's largely a cover artist, I want to say. Though he did draw Moon Knight when Jeff Lemire was writing it, and he has drawn other things. But I really like I miss my Instagram only because of Greg Smallwood and Russell Dodderman's accounts. Because boy, those guys can draw their butts off. But yeah, super stoked on this. I'm sure it'll be great. It looks as though that a lot of the DC heroes are going to be in this as well. Although that could just be the cover, which would be fun because he does not cross paths with a lot of the superheroes, to my recollection. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Also, they're all exciting, aren't they? The Thing #1. This is written by Walter Mosley, of all people. Walter Mosley, this is his first comic book, in fact. He did do a Fantastic Four sort of project 10 years ago, but I don't know if that. I first of all have to look into what it is, but I don't think it's certainly not a monthly just comic. The Thing is obviously one of my favorite characters. My favorite Jewish superhero. I have a bit about it. But Walter Mosley might be more well known to the world as the creator of Easy Rawlins, who's a private eye character that he wrote a series of books. The most well known being the first one called Devil in a Blue Dress, which was made into a film with Denzel Washington in the early 90s, I want to say, which I haven't actually seen. But I've read the book and I've read a bunch of his other books. He's an incredible genre fiction writer. He writes a lot of crime. Like the Easy Rawlins books are his most popular, but I'm kind of partial to the Socrates Fortlow books, which is another private eye. I want to say that's in the like the Easy Rawlins books take place in the 60s. I want to say into the 70s, maybe even into the early 80s. And Socrates Fortlow, those took place like in the late 90s, early aughts when he was writing them, I want to say. I don't know why, I just kind of like that series a little bit better. They're all black characters, which is I've always been more interested, or I've had a particular interest in African American characters since I bought my first Public Enemy album in the 7th grade, and so there's that. I even had the great pleasure of going to see Walter Mosley read from what was at the time the newest Easy Rawlins book at a frou-frou bookstore in La Jolla, California, where it was a room full of rich old La Jolla biddies, and then 3 hungover 22-year-olds, as me and my friends. And I remember they announced that Sue Grafton was going to be there. The whole room went, oh! And then you heard 3 assholes go, ask your grandmother who Sue Grafton is. So yeah, Walter Mosley is a big deal to me. So now that he's writing one of my favorite characters, I mean, it's a no-brainer. And then also this week, that's brand new this week, and so is this. What's the Furthest Place from Here? This is a book written by Matthew Rosenberg. And I might recognize the artist / co-writer. Tyler Boss. Yes, I do believe Tyler Boss did Dead Dog's Bite earlier this year. I gotta look it up. But Matthew Rosenberg, I've been following for a few years. He started, Tyler Boss did Dead Dog's Bite, which was also great. So this is gonna be really good. Dead Dog's Bite was a miniseries from just earlier this year. Yeah. Very Twin Peaks sort of a vibe going with that book. I don't know anything about this book, but that's where I know Tyler Boss from. And Rosenberg's bona fides are, he started at Aftershock with books like 4 Kids Walk into a Bank. And there's another, that might have been Black Mask. There's another Black Mask book that he wrote. And then he got snapped up by the big 2. So he's been writing. He wrote a bunch for Marvel. He wrote a Punisher series that was really good. He wrote a Kingpin miniseries that was also very good. I want to say he wrote the X-Men for a minute. That didn't last. That was, I think Rosenberg's X-Men was the last X-Men before Hickman started everything over again, which was kind of shitty. I remember thinking that at the time. I go, Rosenberg didn't even get going on this book, and then you're taking it away from him already. And I think at that point he might have gone to DC, now that I think about it. And so he's written a bunch of stuff for DC lately, including a Joker series that I started and didn't bother finishing, which is how I approach most DC books these days. And now he's back to an indie, and I do think it's kind of a crimey or perhaps a slice of lifey thing, which the indie guys are usually better at. So, boy, what a good picks of the week that was. So much so that I want to do picks of last week now. I mean, I normally would anyway. You know, and ever since we moved into the studio, I barely talk to this gasshole, and he's way over here. Gasshole is when you start to say guy, and then you change your mind to asshole. All right. Oh boy, I got a chunk of reading done last week because I really don't. I've been working more than usual. I've been also commuting more than usual, so I don't have as much time. So when I am home, I kind of make more time to read than to watch TV and stuff. Although I do that. Whatever. Oh, right. Okay, so first up, last week we had After Dark, a horror anthology. Like almost any anthology, it's kind of hit or miss. And I want to say of the 4 stories, 2 of them hit, 2 of them missed. And the Cullen Bunn story, which was the one that I was like the most reluctant about, was really pretty good. And the Jim Starlin story that I was very excited about, kind of stinky. Frank Thierry's got a story in here too, and it's part of the Tales of Mother F. Goose, which I believe is going to be a series of its own series of adult fairy tales, which it's kind of been done. But I do like Frank Thierry, so I don't know. Maybe I'll check it out. But yeah, I kind of didn't need to buy this, but I don't regret buying it either. Go on my magazine shelf. I also read this old ass book, Phantom Stranger number 21. And when I was talking about it, I was going on and on about it last week. I kind of gave the impression that it was more of a Tales from the Crypt type thing. There is a through line story with the Phantom Stranger, but it is largely kind of he shows up and there's other sort of weird mysteries going on, and that's kind of similar here. And this was fun. Yeah. I'd forgotten that, and I might have mentioned it last week. There was a Phantom Stranger series from 2012, maybe 2013, that I really liked. And in that series, and I don't think this had ever come up before, but they made it that the Phantom Stranger was in fact Judas Iscariot, and these. I don't know if you can see it too good, but he wears like the clasp on his cape, and he also kind of wears a necklace sometimes, and those were the 7 pieces of silver or whatever it was that he got for betraying Jesus. It was really pretty good. It only went 2 years, and it was written by Dan Didio, which is not insane. Dan Didio at the time was, I want to say, editor-in-chief for DC Comics, and as I recall, his tenure as EIC over there was people were laughing up their sleeves a lot. They had this big, complicated Green Lantern storyline going on at the time that I remember being kind of controversial. And just in general, like he had a Metal Men feature in Wednesday Comics, which was another anthology they did that was like fine. Like most of the stuff I read by Didio was just fine, but that Phantom Stranger series was unbelievably good. And yeah, all right, that's not what I read though, is it? I also read Ninjak 3 and 4. Now this gets weird as F. So I've been buying this book because Javier Pulido was the artist. Jeff Parker's scripts are great, but Javier Pulido's art was really what I signed up for. So in issue 4, he drew this page, and that's it. He drew page 1, 2, 3, 4. He drew the first 5 pages, and then they handed it over to a fellow named Benny Lobel, who has a similar style, but it's not Javier Pulido. Very odd. Usually that sort of thing only happens if the artist can't finish the book in time. But then it's usually just a couple pages or something. But I looked it up, and Javier Pulido doesn't know what happened. He just got fired off the book. Apparently nobody told him, or he's not telling. It was very weird, and it was also an article on Bleeding Cool about it. Bleeding Cool is a comic book news website that I don't particularly care for because they're kind of the TMZ of comic book press, and I don't much care for that sort of thing. But even they were like, what the hell is going on? And it was, Pulido put up on his website his pages that he had drawn for it, which were frankly just much better. So I don't know what the deal is. But I also, on that Bleeding Cool story, there were a bunch of, I don't know why I keep reading comment sections, especially when it comes to comic book stuff, but people are like, Valiant has betrayed me! This is a betrayal, the likes of which no one has ever seen. Oh, all right, boys, why don't you settle down? I'm disappointed as well, but let's not throw a fit. Plus, Jeff Parker's still writing it, so I don't know. But I'm certainly not going to, because Warren only orders the book for me and another old fart. We're the only two. And I'm like, why am I going to hassle him for it now? Polito's not even drawing it. All right. Some other crap I got to during the week. Speaking of Jeff Parker, I finally read his final volume of Aquaman, Maelstrom. So this was Aquaman 32 through 40, and a couple of stories from Secret Origin series around that same time. And yeah, it's still really good. It felt a little. Jeff Parker's run on Aquaman was one of my favorites. Probably my favorite since Peter David's, which was in the early to mid 90s. And this was great. He finds his mother as kind of the story to this one. Gorilla Grodd shows up, and he's really cool. Gorilla Grodd is a villain I really like, but since he's largely a Flash villain, and I don't read that much Flash, I don't get to see him very often. So yeah, it was good. It did feel a little rushed. I felt like maybe he was leaving the book, under protest, so to speak, but I don't know. It was still good. This other blast from the past, I don't even remember buying these. This is Guy Gardner Reborn 1 through 3. These I ordered from Lone Star Comics out in Texas there. I can tell because that's their label, but I don't remember doing that at all. I do seem to recall, though, during the lockdown that I was reading a lot more DC stuff, and I was getting nostalgic for stuff from my childhood. So this 3-issue prestige miniseries leads into the Guy Gardner solo series that Chuck Dixon wrote. I want to say it went for about 19 or 20 issues. And Gerard Jones writes this series, and I also was a fan of his writing. And he was a big Green Lantern writer, so it made sense. Guy Gardner was replacement. He replaced Hal Jordan at some point in the 80s, and he became a member of the Justice League as well. But he was kind of an anti-hero. He's really kind of a dick, and he's very brash and braggarty, but he's also very good. So in this story, he's just been stripped of the Green Lantern ring, so he's trying to get a power ring, and he eventually succeeds. And Lobo shows up, and Kilowog, and Gnort, and a bunch of other supporting cast from that Guy Gardner series. So this was fun. This also was drawn by Joe Staton, who I always kind of go back and forth on. Joe Staton was, I think he started in the 70s. And I actually much prefer his work from that time, even though it was very generic. As he got into his own in the 80s and 90s, the style just didn't really do it for me. But I would still read, he drew the whole Guy Gardner series, which I read every month. So I guess I didn't dislike it that much. And now here's some stuff. Now here's something you'll really enjoy. I read the last of John Byrne's Avengers West Coast, or the West Coast Avengers, however you want to say it. And this issue in particular might be of more interest than usual. This is Avengers West Coast number 56, or West Coast Avengers 56. I keep it in the W section. So back in the this has been the late 80s, early 90s, the Avengers books were kind of starting to sag, so they put John Byrne on those because he was a very popular artist and writer at that point, and he also, one of the reasons I think he was so popular is because he would really shake things up when he wrote the Fantastic Four. He kind of split them up, I want to say. When he wrote Superman, it was like a very weird, like he had a beard for a while and stuff like that, and his cape would get torn up all the time, which never used to happen. And then with this one, he really went to town on the West Coast Avengers. He made Vision more of a robot, so that his marriage to Scarlet Witch kind of became null and void. Scarlet Witch herself, this is the first time that the Scarlet Witch, in this storyline, we find out that Scarlet Witch's hex power works to actually change reality, which was when that WandaVision show came out. This issue skyrocketed in value because it was the first time that had happened. Even though immediately after this story, they went, nope. DeFalco was editor-in-chief at the time, and him and Byrne did not see eye to eye whatsoever. And as much as I've been a fan of John Byrne's my whole life, he has, since I'm an adult, struck me as a real blowhard. And DeFalco just seems like a super nice guy. He wasn't the best writer at times, but I thought he was a perfectly fine editor-in-chief. He was editor-in-chief when I started buying comics, so I had no problems with what he was doing. But one of the most controversial aspects of this funny book, it's so stupid. And I remember I'd heard about this, and I'm sure I'd read this issue before, but I had to look into it and really find out. So in this story, the Scarlet Witch becomes evil, as you can tell from her new dykey haircut. And she's holding the West Coast Avengers hostage. She's holding them in some sort of weird force field that they can't break out of. And on this page, is a very well-known page. If you want to pause it and take a better look at it, the Scarlet Witch is blowing Wonder Man against his will. That's exactly what's happening. Don't tell me it's anything else. So, the story goes, Byrne was fired immediately, or he had quit in protest right after this issue. Or is there one more? There's one more, and then, but it wasn't because of that. It was because he was building towards this storyline where Kang the Conqueror, as Immortus, would, he's a time travel guy. So we would find ourselves in the distant future where Kang had taken over. And when DeFalco got wind of that, he was like, absolutely not. We are not doing that. You're going to do acts of vengeance like everybody else. So this was it was in the early 90s, 1990, in fact, which is when Acts of Vengeance came out. And might have started in 89. But that was a new thing. Doing a big crossover event was still relatively new. Secret Wars had been in 84, and then there had been Secret Wars 2 and Mutant Massacre and Inferno and Fall of the Mutants. But by Acts of Vengeance, it was in the books that it was a year they were going to do a crossover every year. And a lot of creators were upset about that because they wanted to do their own stories. Never mind that it's always supposed to be a big tableau, a big tapestry. So everybody's stories, John Byrne thinks his shit don't stink, so he doesn't have to, I don't want to participate in Acts of Vengeance, so he quit. Good riddance. Because the book sucks. That's the other thing about this run of West Coast Avengers. It's not good. He's trying to shake things up, and it's like, all right. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, but sometimes it just doesn't hit. Sometimes it's a miss. So anyway, so Byrne says, I'm doing issue 57 and I'm gone. And they went, fine. But then, so the story goes. This page, Howard Mackey, who was the editor on the book, supposedly didn't see it or didn't notice it. And it wasn't until it was set to go to the printer that day that they went, oh, she's blowing him. And Byrne, to this day, still is like, all the action is off panel. It's up to the reader to interpret what's going on. And then, dude, she's blowing him. John Byrne, there's nothing else about it. So they tried to kind of cover it up. And if you Google this, you can find John Byrne's original art, and it's much clearer that way. But so they kind of changes where she's like scratching his chest, and then Simon screaming in this point. The original panel, he's just saying it very quietly. No. Which is how anybody getting blown under duress is probably not going to scream like this. Like George Carlin said, here is a sentence no one has ever said. Please stop sucking my dick or I will call the police. It's never happened. And so, yeah, they had to change some of... But I was reading this and I went, what am I? And don't get me wrong, I mean, it's definitely not Comics Code Authority approved. But it's just so bad. That's the real thing about it. I think it was a big controversy at the time. And I mean, people wrote in like, what the hell? And Marvel was like, look, nothing happened on panel, so you can't. It's bad, is what it is. I have no problem with Wonder Man getting blown under duress or otherwise. He's a cyborg, an android. I don't know how he's getting blown, but yeah. It's just bad writing. The Scarlet Witch turn, the heel turn that she does, is very rushed. That's the other thing that Byrne did. He made it so that not only were the Scarlet Witch and the Vision, their marriage falling apart, but then we find out that her children are not real, that she had only kind of made them out of her own. Because, I mean, how else could an android actually impregnate a lady? And so she was going crazy. The great thing about this, though, is that all this really laid the framework for future Brian Michael Bendis stories, like House of M and Disassembled, or reverse those, where that's exactly what happens. Wanda's powers become, even though they retconned it, when Bendis got a hold of the characters, he went, no, we're doing the John Byrne thing. And he did. And he did Age of Ultron instead of Kang, but whatever. But yeah, that's how Wanda, and then that, again, that they mined all this stuff for the television show, which I only saw half of. Good story, huh? No, that's the, yeah, but the the scene itself, let me go back and look at this again. Because this has become one of my favorite comic book things. So in this storyline too, what Byrne did to further complicate matters was that Wonder Man, Simon Williams, who is somehow like kind of related to Vision, because he's also an android. I think he was copied from the original Vision, but then he'd become his own dude, and he has a brother too, the Grim Reaper. I don't know how that works, but. So he's madly in love with Wanda, but he can't do anything about it because she's married to his brother android and fellow Avenger. It's all very soap opera. But, so yeah, Wanda is, now she's evil. So she's like, Simon, are you attracted to me now? And, does it not please you to see me not only free of the Vision... ... but free also of such petty moralities as once encumbered me. And then, Wanda, what are you? You are so very handsome, Simon. Did you think I never noticed? Does it not thrill you that I no longer hide my appreciation? And then she sucks his dick. Get the fuck out of here. It's such bad storytelling. First of all, if that really... I've dated a lot of mean women, and let me tell you, when they're holding you in a stasis field, they're not blowing you. But what really blows my mind with this sort of thing, and I don't know why it would still surprise me these many years later, the men, and they were all men, the men who were writing these funny books back when I was a boy had seemingly as much experience with real life women that I did as a 6th grader. No woman And the whole sort of the undercurrent, the implication there is that only an evil woman would cut her hair short and then willingly engage in oral sex. What? What are you talking about? It's so laughable. Obviously, it's so ridiculous. John Byrne is that's almost what it feels like. So Chris Claremont, who wrote the Uncanny X-Men for like 25 years, would do a lot. Nothing quite so obvious as, you know, getting Wonder Man blown, but the Hellfire Club and the White Queen and all the bondage gear that these characters wore, and I mean, Claremont had some weird sex stuff that he was into. Not shaming it, not shaming it. I'm just saying it was a weird place to put it into your day job as a funny book writer. And as I got older, I was like, boy, this is a real backwards way to write these female characters. And Claremont and Byrne, even though they did some of their best work together, reputedly hated each other after a while because they're both two of the biggest blowhards in the industry, and they both, Byrne, I think, especially wanted more credit. I'm the one who does. And so that was when he stomped off to DC, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, came back to Marvel. He was always back and forth. So yeah, it feels a little bit like this round of the Avengers West Coast is John Byrne going, oh yeah? You think Chris Claremont has never actually met a real life woman? Well, wait till they get a load of me. It was a very popular film at the time, Batman. Alright, that's a good half hour. Sleep tight, everybody. Don't let the Scarlet Witch blow you.